Hello, everyone.
Hello, everyone.
Today, we'll talk about writing messages for sequences, the logic of creating them, about bad sequences, good sequences, how to formulate an offer in them, formulate a CTA, and how to generally guide a lead to your CTA. Today, 90% of the lecture part will be led by Yevgen.
So let's get started. Well, in the very first topic, in general, what I very often see as a mistake among those who do lead generation is basically the number of touch points with people, meaning how many messages should we write, how often, so that they are native follow ups. And at the same time, so we don't annoy the person, so we don't get blocked, they don't complain about us, and so on. Because as practice shows, if the person you're talking to complains about harassment in the messages or about them being annoying, or simply marks the message as spam, usually just one complaint is enough and the profile gets banned. Yes, it can be unblocked in most cases, but nevertheless, just one complaint from a person about unsolicited messages can get the profile blocked. So I always recommend starting an outreach strategy if we're doing it completely cold to a cold audience from scratch with 4 touch points. The first touch point we have is a connection request, and then we have our main message and 2 more follow ups. This is a basic strategy that is executed cold from the very beginning. So we send a connection request depending on our goal and what offer we're leading with. This connection request can either be empty or it can be personalized with some text. You need to test which audiences this will work better on. But definitely, the main rule of a connection request is that you can't sell in it. And in a connection request, it should be briefly written what you do, in what field, and how you can be useful. But don't say right away something like, let's explore potential opportunities for cooperation, or I have a very cool offer for you. You absolutely cannot say this in a connection request. After the connection request, the next question is, how long should we wait for the request to be accepted? I always recommend waiting at least 2 weeks. That is, very often there are situations, especially if we are talking about European and American markets. There, connection requests are accepted slowly. That is, here in Ukraine, in Central Europe, requests are accepted quite quickly, within an hour, within a day, and so on. But in other countries, the further west you go, the longer it can drag on. So the waiting time for a connection request to be accepted is at least 2 weeks. But I don't recommend leaving connection requests pending for more than 1 to 1.5 months. After that, the contact request must be withdrawn. Why is this necessary? Again, it's a matter of security. If a lot of unaccepted requests accumulate on LinkedIn, LinkedIn pays attention to your profile. Aha, this person's requests are not being accepted. Why? Maybe there's some kind of spanner. Maybe they're adding people they don't know. Well, as we remember, LinkedIn's policy states that you only have the right to add people you know personally. The fact that LinkedIn's policy contradicts itself is another matter. Well, but they do have such a rule. Therefore, you shouldn't accumulate too large a queue of contact withdrawals. That is, well, more precisely, not withdrawals, but rather a queue of unaccepted contacts, so that LinkedIn doesn't pay extra attention to you, doesn't check you for spamminess, and so on and so forth. This is first and foremost a security measure. Let's get back to the topic. Let's imagine our request was accepted. After that comes our main message. And here, well, in principle, regarding the pause between accepting the connection and sending the message, there are no very clear recommendations. Some people send it after a couple of hours, some send it after 1 or 2 days. You can do it differently. The most important thing is not to send the message at the very moment it is accepted. First of all, well, it looks very strange when a message arrives a second after acceptance. It's immediately obvious that it's automation. Secondly, if your connection request is personalized, at the moment of acceptance, it also becomes an incoming message, meaning the person can start replying to it. And if the connection request goes into the inbox and a message arrives here as well, well, they just merge together and look very large. Next, let's imagine they didn't reply to our main message. After that, I recommend waiting 4 to 5 days, and on the fifth day, sending the person a follow up. After the first follow up, you can send another follow up in about a week. That is, the further we go, the longer the intervals between messages should be, so that the person, well, so to speak, forgets about you a little from a negative point of view. Because if we remind them about ourselves every day, again, we'll face responses like, don't write to me. You can see that I'm not replying to you. Maybe there's a reason for that. You shouldn't do that. So, in principle, the basic strategy in terms of touches, it ends here. This doesn't mean that you can't communicate with this person further. It doesn't mean that we've written 3 messages and immediately forget about this person. You just need to pause after that. And for example, what we do is our target audience goes through this first chain. We forget about them for 1 to 1.5 months, and only after that time do we send another follow up. Again, about the context of follow ups, it shouldn't be a message like, I hope you're doing well. I'm just writing to check if you saw my message. Well, first of all, such texts are very overused. More than half of lead gen campaigns, I see messages like this in them. This message provides no practical value, and the person who receives them sees, well, about 10 of them a day. That is, it doesn't stand out in any way, it doesn't make the person reply, and so on. If you follow up, especially the further you follow up, the more attention you need to pay to certain news hooks. Relatively speaking, if you're selling some services, then we have a new package, or some new terms, or a new service. That is, we use this as a trigger. Or, for example, here we have a case study. Look, for a business from your audience, let's say we achieved these kinds of results. If we're talking about some product solutions, then again, here we have, for example, an update, or we've released a new feature. Or you, I remember, said that you were missing something, so we just did it. You can go and test it. That is, every reminder should contain specific details that give the lead value and encourage them to consider this option. And again, regarding follow ups, the second mistake I see quite often is that in follow ups, people try to say the exact same thing as in the first message, but just in different words. This won't work for one simple reason. Well, let's imagine the message was received, the person read it, but they didn't reply. We should immediately keep in mind that the worst case scenario for why they didn't reply is that the person wasn't interested. If they weren't interested, that means we didn't hit the right pain point for that person. Well, accordingly, if we continue to hit that person's pain point that they don't have, well, it won't yield any results. If it didn't work the first time, we have to look for new points, new approaches, some other trigger events that can hook this person, and not just poke them with the same thing. Let's probably move on to the very essence of the messages, what we talk about in them, what's better to use, and what's better not to use. The first and main thing, I don't see many such cases now, but I still have to say that people value their time. People don't like to read long texts, that is, very large texts. People don't like to read fluff, epithets, and any messages that don't carry some social proof. So your message should be as focused as possible, without any unnecessary explanations or embellishments that you can't prove right here and now. So let's say if you write to someone that you have some kind of innovative product, then this word, innovation, must be proven by some practice within that same message. Of course, for example, if a person gets on a demo or an intro call with you, you'll be able to tell them about it, but that's for the intro call itself. But if you're talking about this in a short text, let's say 400 to 500 characters, then you can't prove it. And this word, it just takes up precious space where you could have mentioned a very important or cool feature of yours. The text should be short, the text should be specific, focused, with practical information. If possible, with some case studies, with some examples, with some numbers. Numbers work especially well because, well, they show the practical value that it was like this and now it's like this. And most importantly, something I always say, in our letters, we always try not to focus on ourselves, not to talk about ourselves. The client isn't interested in how many years you've been on the market, how many clients you have, who your clients are, I don't know, how great you are, what your team is like, and so on. The client is interested in what they will get, what their profit will be if they cooperate with you. Accordingly, we talk about the client's pain point, and we talk about how we solve it, and we talk about what final result the client will get. Of course, this is a matter of phrasing and so on, but the general rule is we don't say we say you. It's not we do, it's you get. So that's roughly the algorithm. Regarding the length of the messages, I recommend structuring your offers in such a way that the message is no more than 600 to 700 characters. That is, It's the amount of text that fits on an average smartphone, taking up a little more than half the screen. The next point is don't forget to format your texts. Don't forget to divide them into logical paragraphs. Don't do it like, let's say, we're used to in Word, or like when we read a book, where a paragraph is just a line break. No, do it with a double shift enter, so it's clearly visible, so that between the first and second paragraphs, you definitely have a space with an empty line, because that's simply easier to read. A person can quickly glance over the first paragraph. They might not even, well, they've scanned it, they might not read it, but they'll understand what it's about, what the point is. In other words, it simplifies the path for a person to read your message. I'll add a little to that. What you're saying, Jinya, is that first of all, 600 to 700 characters is the maximum. So if you have the opportunity to convey the essence of your message more concisely, then do it more concisely. Generally, when I write messages, I always try to keep them to about 300 to 400 characters if I can. If I can, of course, yeah, I can stretch it to 600 or 700. But I try to be even more concise in this regard. That's the first thing. And secondly, about what Jenya said, people love numbers. People love case studies. So, as not to take up a lot of space in the text, I, for example, show our numbers using screenshots. So, you can make a commercial proposal in JPEG, roughly speaking. Yeah, a short presentation of a case study with numbers, or just a screenshot from some system. For example, in one of our messages, we actually use a screenshot of our conversions in the system. And that works great. Yes, and I'll add one more small point about the length of messages. Make them short, but don't sacrifice the substance. That is, your message needs to reveal your offer. Because, well, hypothetically, we can write to a person, "Hi, we do lead generation. Interested?" It's very short. It takes about a second and a half to read. But there's no value, no understanding. So describe it briefly, but in a way that makes your offer clear and understandable. Now let's move on directly to the letters. The letter on the left is one that I consider to be one of the worst. I tried to put all the triggers from the letters that I don't like in here. So let's begin. Oh, by the way, not all of them. I also needed to remove the names so there would be no personalization at all in this letter. Our letter starts with the phrase, "Hope you are doing well." Similar phrases like, "Hope you are doing well." They are all overused, meaning a lot of outreach starts with these exact phrases. I once had, I've mentioned it before, a chat for American startup founders on Discord. And they had a separate channel where they would post these kinds of phrases with a caption something like, "If I see this phrase, I immediately know that some outsourcer is contacting me. To sell, I block them because they all write the same way. I don't need that." Accordingly, don't use all these polite phrases, not even writing something like "thank you for connecting." In most cases, it doesn't make sense because it takes up valuable space in the message. Yeah, it's polite, but, well, nobody needs it. People don't read it anyway, they just skip over it. The next line is, "I just wanted to briefly introduce." Again, why would you say that you want to briefly introduce yourself? I mean, it's not brief anymore because you've wasted half the sentence on this phrase. If you want to say what you do right away, then just say it. And next, again, is the trigger that I don't like. We are a design studio with more than 10 years of experience, currently open to new projects. Listen, well, if you're writing to me and telling me about your business, then, well, it's logical that you're open to new projects. You're either looking for a partner or for clients. So, well, these phrases that are too obvious and, again, carry no value, you shouldn't use them. With years of experience, we have created more than 400 innovative designs for our clients, ranging from regular landing pages to complex CRM systems. Next point. Again, nobody is interested in how many projects you've created. How many years you've been on the market doesn't confirm your experience or your background. It just tells you the number of years on the market and the number of projects. The quality of these projects is not revealed in any way. Yes, the next point, which I also mentioned, is the word innovative. Well, if your designs are truly innovative, you can somehow confirm this in one of the follow ups. For example, that we have an innovative framework. We've conducted research. It gives these and these conversion rates. It increases user engagement on the site like this. So you can present it this way and even just follow up with a person with a case study. Or again, with this research article saying, "Hey, go read this, see how it might affect you," for example. But just saying for the sake of it that it's an innovative design, that makes no sense. The next point, I already mentioned this in the last stream, but look at this dash. It's a long one, and it's a very, very big trigger for ChatGPT or some other artificial intelligence. Because artificial intelligence tends to write everything as meticulously, scrupulously, and correctly as possible, with all the rules of grammar and so on. But most people don't even know what combination of symbols to press on the keyboard to get this sign. And the next thing that devalues this message is the words that say we are jacks of all trades. We can do anything from landing pages to CRM systems. And we all understand perfectly well what we can do. But from the point of view of a potential client, an expert, a person can be an expert in one thing. A person can't be an expert in everything at once. That is, in landing pages and in CRMs and in something else, and maybe some development, and maybe they'll even sing a song. Well, that doesn't happen. You either do one or two things very, very well, or you can do everything, but only a little bit. And this a little bit is not what the client needs. And next, one of the similar phrases that we analyzed before this. Look, in this message, you haven't provided any proof for your words. Well, the fact that the team works with dedication, you can't even talk about that because, well, you can't prove it in any way. And if the team doesn't work with dedication, well, that's a very big problem for the client, actually. But top quality, what is meant by the concept of top quality? It's a very subjective indicator. For some, top quality is a forum in the style of 2007, built from a template on UCAS. For some, that's top quality. So these very subjective indicators should also not be used. Regarding on time delivery, well, again, on time delivery or fast development or, say, fast project completion. It's also a subjective matter, but unlike, say, top quality, we can prove this. And again, you need to talk about the approaches, not the fact itself. That is, hypothetically, if you know that you have a distributed team that can work in parallel on, say, three templates, 3 pages of a client site, then you write just that. That unlike, well, without saying unlike other teams, as comparing yourself to others is also not entirely ethical. But you say that we complete projects in 2 to 3 weeks, which is twice as fast, for example, than like standard time. Because we have a distributed team, we can execute the project in parallel. Then we confirm that, yes, indeed, we do it quickly and explain how we do it quickly. Next, we're getting to the CTA. If you are currently looking for a design team, write to me so we can discuss the details. A very weak CTA. Well, what if I'm not looking right now? Indeed, I might not be looking, but there might be some kind of need. So here we're talking about a design team. I don't need a whole design team. Maybe I need a part-time designer. Or maybe I need a team that has a lot of experience in my business, and I want them to just build me some kind of framework that I can take to investors or something like that. So the CTA is very vague, and it hits a single point that can shut down further dialogue. And the finale. You can also check out our website and a link to the website. You can leave a link to a case study. You can leave a link to a portfolio. That is, you can leave a link, again, to some thematic research, but you just have to lead up to this research logically. But a link to the site gives nothing because, well, it's just a landing page. A person goes to the site, they're not interested in looking for the button where you have case studies to view the case studies, or where you have the portfolio button to view the portfolio. If you want to bring a person to a specific landing page, lead them directly to that landing page. You don't need to complicate the person's path. Well, again, if we're talking about design, designers and principals should know that the main concept is to simplify the user experience as much as possible, so that a person doesn't have to think about where and what to look for, but goes through their path to the shopping cart or to registration as quickly as possible, and so on and so forth. This is the main concept. So, in principle, this concept should be maintained in outreach as well. You have to guide your client along the path of least resistance. We've analyzed the non selling email. Let's move on to the other column. The message starts with a trigger question. How do you measure the UI UX, the experience, or the impact of your UI UX on your customers, on your clients? Why is it good to start with some kind of question? First, this format of question, this specific one, there can be several, but this particular format of question, it immediately sparks interest and it doesn't hint that they're going to sell you something. Because, well, hypothetically, another entrepreneur just like you could be writing to you just to share their experience with you. Well, in chatting about a topic, sharing experience on LinkedIn, that's a totally normal thing. So it makes you more likely to open the message. The next point that also has an impact is that right from the first question, you show that you understand a specific niche and that you're an expert in it. So you immediately show that you're not just, well, again, using the design example, that you're not just doing design for design's sake, to make the pictures look pretty, to pick the right color palette, and so on. You immediately steer the dialogue in a direction where you can actually help. Next, we help e commerce businesses create designs that boost engagement by up to 20%. First of all, again, there's personalization. We're saying that we know how to do this for e commerce businesses, for a specific niche, for a specific industry. We are experts here. We create designs, meaning no innovative, cool, great, and so on. And the goal of this design is that it increases user engagement by a certain metric. Well, again, I'm not a designer. I made that number up. It might not be true. Or maybe it's not even something that's measured. I can't really say. But it's just the concept itself, the approach to this message. That is, we immediately say what we do, how, and what final profit the client gets. Next, we give them additional value. I noticed a few areas for improvement on your website. So let's do a free 15-minute audit. That is, we're already saying again that we've looked into it, that we know the areas for improvement. An important point, a matter of wording. You shouldn't tell the client they have a problem on their site. You should say that it can be improved. So, because when we say that something is wrong, something isn't working, something is bad, well, the first thing that might pop into the client's head is, who are you to judge whether this works correctly or incorrectly? So that immediately triggers a negative reaction. But phrasing it as we can help improve it's used in a more positive tone. And then we have a short speech about what the person gets from this audit. So a checkup of all the modules that might where users might be dropping off, a specific plan on how to improve these modules, and recommendations for a comprehensive improvement of the UI UX on, say, this user's online store. So we give a specific plan. You show up, you spend 15 minutes, or rather, well, as we've already said, no one spends time. Everyone invests time. And you get this, this, and this. Clear, concise, to the point. Next, book a call using this link. Or, well, what we mean is that, for example, your calendar might not have any suitable slots. Or name a few of your time slots and we'll coordinate a call with you. So, a clear CTA. Here's the link. Get on a call. By the way, I highly recommend everyone use various booking tools like from HubSpot or Calendly itself or other services you might use because it increases conversion. A lot of people don't want to play ping pong with time slots. Like, this time is good for me, this time is good for me, how about this one? No. People just go in, book this call in 2 clicks, and there's none of this extra communication that stretches out the time. And now for the most interesting part. It seems like this message looks much bigger than this one, but in fact, they have more or less the same number of characters. Yesterday, when I was writing them, I checked. This one has, I think, 535, and this one has 550 characters. Yes, visually it looks bigger, but it's completely broken down into logical blocks. So, hello, okay, a question, okay, quickly, what we do, what we offer, okay. The next logical block, you'll get this. The next logical block, book a call. So it's very easy to scan with your eyes, and it's easier to read, despite the fact that visually it's a little bigger. This text, it looks like a solid block of text. So for me to understand what it's about, I need to read the whole thing. If I scan it diagonally, like people usually do, the first thing I'll see is 10 years, 400 innovative designs, some link. That's it. So that's all that'll catch my eye because, well, these symbols, they stand out from the rest. But overall, I need to spend time reading the entire message to understand what they want from me. The final topic is, in general, what ideas you can use to approach sales. Of course, for a cold contact, very often, and everyone starts with this, it's just a direct head on sale, as was shown in this example. Hi, we are so and so, we do such and such, you'll get this kind of impact. Let's do it. This is one of the scenarios. But when you work through your cold database, and sooner or later it might run out, especially if we're talking about some rather narrow niches, you'll have to interact with people again from other profiles and so on. And then the head on approach, well, in some cases it just gets old. In others, there's simply no room left to maneuver with this head on approach. Because, for example, well, it's impossible to describe some new features very briefly, or it's impossible to explain in a few words. The essence of a new service. It might be super cool, but a person just won't understand its value in 3 sentences. And in this case, we have to come up with some new approaches, new methods, and what kind of offer we're actually approaching people with. So the first one we discussed is the direct sale. The next approach you can take, which, by the way, we recently tested in our own outreach, is the content based approach. So we don't start by selling. Instead, we write, "Hey there, we conducted some research." Research in particular works really well. So, not just some useful article like 50 popular designs in 2025 or the 10 best restaurants in Paris for 2024 or something similar. No, these are rather generalized articles. They are usually written quite amateurishly and so on, and they carry very, very little value. That is, it has to be some kind of targeted content that a person will find interesting, from which they will get some new insights, get some new information, and be able to form some kind of operational picture. So it has to be exactly that kind of impactful content. But we can approach it by saying, "We conducted a study. Look, it turns out that as of today, if you use this and that, you can increase such and such metrics. Here's a link to the full study. I hope you enjoy it." Of course, then there's the issue of link marketing, where a person has to click through, read to the end, and at the end, there will be some kind of bonus for them to leave their email, or an invitation to register for a trial, and so on. So you have to keep that funnel going. You need to place lead magnets so you don't lose the person. But it's a good way to redirect them to something useful. If there's really something useful there, they'll remember you. Because, well, generalized content about, I don't know, why the sky is blue today, and why it's blue at all if space is colorless and the atmosphere is transparent. Well, that's just some kind of entertainment content. At best, it will be remembered as some kind of meme, if you even put one in there. Something useful, impactful for the business, for the person, for their field of activity, will make them remember you, and at the same time, it will create more trust and more interest. Oh, if I've read one article and there's something interesting for me, something new, these guys probably write other useful things, so I'll follow them. So the approach is like this. We enter through content and then continue to warm up leads in parallel and through other channels. And after the content, we can also write something like "I hope you read it. We talked about these metrics there. How about a 15-minute call? I can show you how to build this using your own example." And you'll have a ready-made sequence. You'll be able to launch it and test it. The third approach, actually, in terms of importance, it should have been the first one, but I'm talking about it third. And here, maybe Sasha will add a little something, because this is a bit more of a technical story. Entering a sale through intent signals. So, what can be an intent signal? It's hiring a new employee, some C level or head of department. In other words, this is an intent signal that the company is actively growing, raising another round of investments. This can also be tracked through certain services. The next thing you can also track is, for example, the opening of a new representative office or a head office in a new country, and so on. These kinds of trigger moments can prompt, well, first of all, they indicate a certain need. That is, let's say if a company has an open CMO position, we can logically assume that most likely they first hire a marketing director who will then build their own marketing team. And this is a very opportune moment to come in with your marketing agency's proposal because it's a clear need for a marketing department, for marketing activities for a specific business. And at the same time, this need is not being met, and they haven't even formed a team for its implementation. So you can work with intent signals. Sash, regarding perhaps the technical side or what other intent signals there might be, maybe you can add something here if you have anything.
Yeah, I can add a bit to that because, well, basically, everyone thinks that intent signals are a very narrow thing. Like an investment in the last 30 days or an open job vacancy right now, those are great intent signals. But in reality, these aren't the only intent signals you can use. There are broader ones depending on your offer. For example, to sell Grinfi, we actively use the signal that your company is actively selling on Upwork. Upwork isn't just a one time thing. We went in, scraped Ukrainian or European businesses selling on Upwork, and started writing to them like, hey, you're selling, so hello. Or, for instance, marketing agencies sell really well through Grinfi. We went to marketing agencies and said, we know your competitors are already with us. And for us, that's an intent signal. Let's talk, roughly speaking. Also, yeah, it could also be open job vacancies. And actually, not just when you want to replace a position, but when you want to expand it. So, for example, for us, an open lead gen vacancy can be an intent signal because if there's an open lead gen vacancy, it likely means they have active lead gen, which means automation might be needed. And it's like that with anything. So the point is, there are many intent signals, some of which should be automated through something like Clay, because Clay has many settings for tracking specific companies, while others can just be scraped once through Sales Navigator or other tools, just by knowing and planning your strategy for the signal you want to target. And by the way, when you use intent signals specifically, that's when you can use personalized connection requests. I mean, you need at least basic premium, but nonetheless, it's usable because in the invite you can write, hi, I'm writing to you because I know this specific info about you. So let's connect and talk. And this increases conversion. You can work with this, it works quite well. And often, if a connection request based on an intent signal is well written, the lead might reply right then. Oh, interesting. Let's talk. And that's it. Then you schedule a call and sell personally, which is easier than via text. It's always easier. Time consuming, but much easier. So that's the story. As for automation, well, by the way, our next meeting is on automation. We'll discuss in more detail how to automate it there. But basically, everything can really be automated, meaning you can set up a specific intent signal once, set an update interval, and it'll consistently update and automatically send to decision makers at companies where the signal triggered, with your message focusing on that signal. By the way, Jenya, you mentioned we have some activity regarding content. We do have content activity, but we've already lowered its priority. Our top priority now is 4 or 5 signals we're working on in parallel in our outreach, and they're giving a really great conversion rate. LinkedIn activity, marketing, Upwork, and some other things. So we've gathered 4 or 5 signals, and they really work great with personalized invites. It works very well.
Well, I'll add a little more using the example of a signal we've gathered for ourselves. I mean, well, we had to involve developers and ChatGPT a bit and build a bot. But in fact, what's happening with us now? We have a profile that is a member of many specialized communities on Telegram that are related to sales. Well, sales, marketing, lead generation, and so on and so forth. And this profile has a bot connected to it. The bot tracks key phrases: LinkedIn, lead generation, outreach, automation, and blah, 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 blah. It monitors dozens of chats at once. And as soon as a message with a keyword appears in a chat, it immediately informs us, and we see the request. That is, well, physically, for example, we can't track a situation where someone in a chat asks, hey, recommend an automation system. Well, it's physically difficult to do. But there is a bot that reports this. We get a signal, we go in, we see that there is such a request, and we can go in and make a recommendation or answer something on the topic if they are asking for some advice. Yes, this is, well, a slightly different topic. It also builds the brand, and it's not about LinkedIn at all. But also, you don't have to limit yourself to the signals that, for example, the same Clay offers you from a technical point of view. You can think about what is interesting for you, and in general, what you can track. And based on that, build your own integration. Yes. And if, for example, you use what Xenia said at the beginning, for example, some kind of lead distribution to your site so that they subscribe to some of your updates or newsletters and so on, then you can build a signal in which you, through SEO or contextual advertising, attract leads to register on your blog. And when they register, their email is sent, for example, to Clay or Apollo, their LinkedIn is found, and a message comes to them from you on LinkedIn, like, hi, I saw that you registered on my blog. What articles are you most interested in? What do you want to talk about? This is also a signal, meaning this person is interested in your company specifically. They gave their contact info, their email. From that, you can easily find their LinkedIn in about 60% of cases and write them a personal message without any problems. The next strategy, the next approach. This is not about direct sales. It's more about establishing relationships, acquaintances, building a network. but nevertheless. You can approach it through industry conferences. The strategy is very simple. We just write to the person, "Hi, I know you're a participant at, let's say, the Web Summit. I'll be at such and such a booth, or I'll just be a visitor. So let's schedule a meeting. We'll meet for 15 minutes, have a cocktail, have some coffee, talk, and get to know each other." So the approach is something like that. This won't, of course, result in immediate sales or anything like that, but you can build a network through this approach, and you don't necessarily have to be a participant, especially in these communities. No one is stopping you from writing after an event is over, saying, "Hey man, I think I saw you, but we didn't get a chance to talk. Let's get on a call for 15 minutes and get to know each other, because I found what you were talking about interesting." Events are usually large. Participants are in the hundreds and thousands. If you read it like that, in most cases, no one will remember whether you were at that event or not. And you can also approach it from the other side. "Listen, there's an event in 2 weeks. I see you'll be there. Let's schedule a meeting. On such and such a date, at such and such a time, I'll come up to you." So you can approach it from these angles in terms of professional events, certain community gatherings, and so on and so forth. And the last two approaches that can be considered. The first one, it concerns more, again, well, the greatest needs and the most active users. They are the most numerous, at least visible from a high level. These are, after all, service IT businesses. And now it's very hard for outsourcing companies to sell, especially very difficult and almost impossible to sell so called body shopping. The approach no longer works where you say, "Hi, we have cheap engineers at this much per hour. Super great. They know everything." It doesn't work like that anymore. Of course. Well, IT businesses come up with many, many strategies, many different ones, many approaches, tricks, and so on and so forth. I wouldn't even say I'm a strong expert here. I won't go into this very deeply, but simply the trend I've been seeing lately is that service companies are starting to sell ready made frameworks, ready made skeletal solutions. That is, you should have some kind of working MVP developed, and you come to the client and sell not your development services, but relatively speaking, "Look, man, you have fintech there. We have a calculation module, for example, for cashback. Look, we have it ready. We can customize it for you, see what it can give you. Let's talk about how interested you are, how we can integrate this module into your product." That is, to come in with ready made skeletal solutions. That's as far as the service IT business is concerned. And the last approach, on the contrary, concerns more product companies that develop specific services, sell them either in SaaS format or directly. Well, monetization is important, but it's some kind of finished product. This is the approach through so-called custav, through customer interviews. That is, you go to a person and don't say buy the service, but approach it from the point of view of, "Look, we've developed it, but we're currently gathering feedback from potential users. If you feel the need, I'll be happy to tell you how it works. And you, as a potential user, will tell us what you'd like to see in this service, what price you'd want for it, and which functions are most important to you." First, you'll actually get feedback as a bonus from the perspective of a potential customer. And this way, you're already inviting the customer to a demo. It's as if they're telling you what they want to see, but you're showing them the functionality. So the person asks a question, like, "I'd like to see something like this." And you immediately reply, "Look, we already have such a thing, or it can be implemented like this, and like this, and it will work for you." Basically, that's it.
Then have a great Wednesday, everyone. Have a great end of the week, everyone. And until next Wednesday, when we'll talk about the practical side of automating all these mailings, uploading leads, creating automation templates, and launching campaigns, where Xenia will have a lot to say. So see you then and have a great Wednesday. Goodbye.
Bye bye, everyone.